Hello everybody, welcome back. Shalom, shalom. Good to be with you again today as we learn the 10th. We're up to the 10th Torah portion, the 10th Parashat Vayigash of the Jewish Torah calendar. We are in Parashat Miketz, the Torah portion of Miketz. And it's an amazing parasha, and this week we're going to be focusing on chapter 41 of the book of Genesis and the 5 books of Moses. It is a remarkable Torah portion. Here we go. So what do we have? We have the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, as we call him in Hebrew, or Pharaoh, dreaming. And he's dreaming here about 7 amazing, fat and handsome cows coming up from the Nile, and then some skinny, ugly cows coming up and swallowing the fat cows. We have a similar thing, if you look down at verse 5, with 7 ears of grain. The same thing, healthy and good ears of grain, all is good, and then the next part of his dream, beaten up grains, and those weak, decrepit grain swallows up the good grain. Parashat or Pharaoh is bothered by this. As it says at line 8, and I'll read in Hebrew, Vayahi vaboker, v'tipa'em rucho. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. He calls all his wise men together, this king of Egypt, and they have nothing to help him with. He is troubled and he wants an answer. Then suddenly the chief cupbearer, who until now had forgotten about Joseph, though he'd promised to remember him when he gets out of prison because Joseph had helped him, suddenly at verse 12, he remembers him. And it says, and there was with us a Hebrew lad, a Hebrew boy was with us down there in the dungeon. And Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, doesn't pause for a second. No matter that we're talking here about a prisoner in the dungeon, the lowest of low, the man is troubled. And he hears about a man with a talent, and he immediately rushes him out of the dungeon and into the king's quarters in order to receive help. Joseph, of course, we learn a great deal from him. Straight away he says, here is the dream. Joseph says, I'll listen to your dream, but it is not I. It is not I. It's God who will give you the answer. It is God that will bring peace to Pharaoh. That's it. Verse 16. Pharaoh then breaks in to a huge long description of these dreams again. We get a repetition here. But then Joseph says to Pharaoh at verse 25, chapter 41, and Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dream is one. What God is doing, he has told Pharaoh. And again, verse 28, it is this matter that I have spoken to Pharaoh, what God is about to do. What's interesting here is that, think about Joseph's story. He grows up with his brothers. Great challenges he's had. Jealousy in the family. He's sold into slavery. He ends up in Egypt. He ends up being teased by Potiphar's wife. He ends up in prison. Much longer than perhaps he should have. He was not remembered there by the cupbearer. And then he comes out in the craziest of circumstances. We're going to see now a rags to riches story. And still, he's as humble as anything. Maybe prison, maybe this difficult journey has made him humble. Much more so than when he was, as we discussed last week, when he was very descriptive and very out there with his brothers and describing the dreams of them bowing down to him. But here he is, and he gives all the thanks to God. Anything that I can do for you, King of Egypt, Pharaoh, it is because God is with me. God is interpreting these dreams. It has nothing to do with me. Now, if you don't think that things that you say can be copied, that things that you do sets a personal example, at line 38, we see already Pharaoh starting to jump on this idea that there is a God. There is one God. It is Joseph's God. Verse 38, so Pharaoh said to his servants, will we find anyone like this, a man in whom there is the Spirit of God? And Pharaoh says to Joseph, ויאמר פרעה אל יוסף, אחרי הודיע אלוהים מותך, את כל זאת אין נבון וחכם כמוך. No one has the understanding and is as wise as you, he says to Joseph, because God has let you know all this. So we now have the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, following in those spiritual, believing footsteps of Joseph. It's a remarkable thing. And he appoints him with that ring on his finger over all Egypt. What a story. From being thrown in the pit in last week's Torah portion, into the dungeons, into Egypt, and now he becomes number two in the mighty Egypt. And what does he do? What does he do in his first duty? What does it say at verse 46? Yosef is just ben shloshim, it says. He is just 30 years old. He's a young man when he stood before Pharaoh. And what does line 46 go on to say? What did he do? He went out, milifnei Paro. He went out from before the king, and he went out bechol eretz Mitzrayim. What does it mean? He went and passed through all of Eretz Mitzrayim, all the land of Egypt. This man Joseph becomes the number two in Mitzrayim, and the first thing he does, says Jewish commentators, he goes out to see the people. He doesn't sit in the palace. He doesn't rule just from above. He goes out and he sees the people across the provinces. And this, my friends, is a remarkable lesson. There are a whole range of lessons from this week's Torah portion, some of which we've covered here. First of all, we see a Pharaoh who says, when I find someone smart, when I see someone with potential, when I know there's someone who can help me and help my kingdom, I bring him up. I don't push him down. I bring him up and I allow him to take a role. What a marvelous, marvelous lesson that is for those of us involved in community life, in organizational leadership, perhaps even in national politics. No matter where that person is on the ladder of life or in his profession, see the good in people, see what they can bring for a country, particularly in crisis, and raise them up, bring them up to be with us and to work with us. Empower people. Joseph, humble, huge humility, gives credit where credit's due. He says it's not about me, it's about God. God gave me this power to interpret dreams. Remarkable. He's standing in front of the king. He could have taken all the credit for himself, and yet he is as humble, like they say about Moses. Very, very humble, and able to understand that it's not all about us. Pharaoh follows in Joseph's footsteps. The personal example set by Joseph is strong, and Pharaoh himself recognizes God. And finally, when you take a leadership position, when you begin to lead a people, an organization, a community, a project, go out and explore. Meet the people. Come down to the level of the people. Get off your horse. Step out of your chariot and be one with the people. Get to know them. Explore. Listen. And then you can lead. And then you can lead a people through crisis and through good times and through great times. My friends, those are the lessons this week from the Torah portion. I wish you only good in the leadership roles that you take on, that we all take on. And you should have a Shabbat Shalom, a good Sabbath, and blessings from Jerusalem to you all around the world. All the best.